And on to Lab 6, Designing for Remote Access. We'll be doing Exercise 6.1, Installing Configuring Routing and Remote Access, Exercise 6.2, Configuring a VPN Server, Exercise 6.3, Configuring a VPN Client, Exercise 6.4, Resetting the Servers, Exercise 6.5, Using Direct Connection Manager Kit, CMAC, and we won't be doing the lab challenge, which is deploying direct access. This lab requires us to have the following servers up and running: RWDC01, Server 02, and the following workstation, Win8A. Now before I start running into this lab here, a few key points I want to go over with you guys. This lab, when I first looked at it, looked good at first. There's a couple little points that made the hairs in the back of my neck stand up, but figured what the hell, let's go for it. Unfortunately, this lab doesn't explain why you're configuring what you're configuring and what the configurations actually mean. Another problem that I found with this lab is a lot of the instructions are either incomplete, missing, or flat out wrong. So we'll be addressing those as we go through the lab. Exercise 6.1, we're going to be installing and configuring routing and remote access on Server 02. RAS allows our users to connect to a server remotely through dial-up or VPN. It can also provide NAT services and routing. So on Server 02, we're going to go into Manage, and we're going to add the roles and features and select Routing and Remote Access. Okay, so we have the features along with the role here. Next, keep everything the same. Next, gives it a beef. And one thing that we're going to have to toss in here as well as direct access is routing. And we'll select next. Then install. Now that we have RAS installed, we'll click close. Now on to 6.2. Now, exercises 6.2 is configuring the VPN server, and 6.3 is configuring the VPN client. Here's where this lab really goes off the rails and turns into a craptacular turd blossom. Reason being is they don't explain the networking and they don't get the configuration right on either of them. So let's do a little bit of backtracking here and go back to Visio. The lab here specifically wants us to work with, in the beginning anyway, we need to have RWDC01 up and running, we have to have Server 02 up and running, and we have to have Win8A up and running. On Server 02, what we're going to be doing is on the secondary network card, we're going to be configuring an IP address of 192.168.2.1, and we're going to be plugging it into the private network, which isn't explained. And when you go into 6.3, they tell you do all your configurations on Win8B, and they don't mention anything at all about Win8A. So, in effect, this is what we're doing. We aren't doing Win8A, we're doing Win8B. And we're also going to be configuring the network card here to have an IP address of 192.168.2.10. If we get this right, what's going to wind up happening is, since these two network cards are on the same network, they're going to be able to connect to one another. We can have multiple networks running on the same switch, even if there aren't any VLANs to separate them. We can have 192.168.3.1, 4.1 as clients, etc. And they'll all be able to communicate with one another perfectly fine, thank you very much, without any routing. You do wind up getting some little nightmares and stuff when it comes to DNS servers and stuff, but you can actually do this, and this is the way that we're going to configure it to get this lab to actually work. So with that, let's configure our networking first. This here on Server 02, we're going to take this network card and we're going to plug it into the private network. here it's not connected, we're going to put it onto private. And there we go. And on our client side, Win8B, we're going to leave this as is. And we're going to leave this network card disabled as is. So let's configure our server. First off, we're going to wind up doing a little bit of renaming here. And on here, they want us to rename this to internal. And on this one, they want us to name it external. On our external one, they want us to configure it as follows. Go to properties, IPv4, use the following IP address: 192.168.2.1. Subnet mask 255.255.255.0. No external gateway, and leave everything else as is. Now that we have that done, let's configure RAS. Tools, routing and remote access. Now we have to configure our server. We do that by clicking on Server 02, and we can click on Configure and Enable Routing and Remote Access to call up the wizard. Next, we have to do is set up a virtual private network with NAT. This allows our clients to actually connect through our network using NAT. We'll use our external network, and we're going to configure this from a specified address range. Click New, and we'll go from 192.168.1.30 to 192.168.1.35. And click OK. Next, now use routing and remote access to authenticate connection requests. That's what we want. Finish. That's fine. And now the server will start. And we got our little green up arrow. That means we're all good to go. Now the lab tells us that we have to configure the Windows firewall. And it tells us we have to go down here and click on Administrative Tools, which isn't there. So we're going to do a search for a firewall. Windows Firewall with Advanced. Okay, now that we have that, we have to disable our domain, private, and public profiles. So Actions, Properties, and on the domain profile, firewall off, private, off, public, off. In the real world, you would never, ever, ever do this. And done. All turned off. That concludes that part of it. Now, before we hop on to RWDC01, just going to take a run into here, and we're going to take a look at this. These are all the connections that we can possibly have here. Now, if we right click on ports, we can go properties, and we'll see here are the number of connections that we can accept here, which is the answer to question number 1. It's 128. Okay, now we go to Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers. Users, Administrator. And here we go to Dial In. And we make sure that we select Allow Access. That allows us to dial in and use VPN. Apply, click OK. And now on to 6.3. Now we're going to configure our client. And we're going to give our client the following IP address: 192.168.2.10. Not changing anything else. And that's good. Now we're going to do this a simple way. We're going to open up network and sharing. And we're going to set up a new connection or network. And we're going to connect to the workplace over a VPN. And I'll set up an internet connection later. And our internet address is going to wind up being the 192.168.2.1 destination. We'll just call it Contoso. They want us to call it VPN connection, but this will be a little bit clearer for you. And we'll click Create. Okay, we'll go in through the same way an end user would. This funky little icon here, that's VPN, so we'll click on here, we'll go connect. It's going to ask us for our username and password. And if we're lucky, it shows we're now connected. And voila, it shows that we are now connected to our Contoso domain and that we've logged on properly onto RWDCO1. So we know we have a success here. Now I just want to hop over to RWDCO1. And the answer to question number 2, by default, control access through the NPS network policy is the default. We had to go allow access. Let's just find one of our other. Hey, let's take a look at good old Beverly. And there you go. That's it by default. Now on to exercise 6.4, resetting servers. So let's go back to server 02. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go in here and we're going to have to go disable routing and remote access. Actually, before I do that, here's where you can see what clients are actually logged in right now. And I've been logged in for 3 minutes and 18 seconds. If I go disconnect, refresh, and there we go. I'm no longer there. Right click, and we're going to disable routing and remote access. Okay, on to exercise 6.5 using the Connection Manager Administration Kit. We'll go Tools, click on Connection Manager Administration Kit to call it the wizard, select Next. We're going to create an installer for Windows Vista and above. Click Next. If we had an existing profile, we can add one in here. We'll keep this defaulted. Our service name, we'll call this MyVPN. File name will be MyVPN. Just a quick note, this has to remain as a single word with no spaces or special characters. If you have any, it won't work. Put in a space here, we'll go Next. It'll tell us to bugger off. Fix that. We shall. Click Next. We're not going to add the realm name to the username. Realm is domain, by the way. Click Next. If we had any profiles, we can add them here. We don't have any. We'll go Next. We'll select phone book from this profile, and we're always going to connect to 192.168.2.1. You'll note we can add in a server name or an IP address. Real world, you may want to have vpn.contoso.com. That IP you would assign to your VPN server. That way there, if you ever monkey with anything or you change service providers or anything, vpn.contoso.com would still work after the DNS and records update in the public network. We don't have DNS here for this particular case, so we're just going to go with the IP address. We'll select Next. VPN entries, MyVPN by default. We're just going to hop into here, take a look at some additional settings, and we're going to click on the Security tab. Question number 4, by default, which authentication method is supported? And here's our authentication method that is supported by default, Microsoft Chat version 2.2. And if we go into the Advanced tab, here if we wanted, we can put in contoso.com as our DNS suffix. We're not going to bother with any of that, so we're just going to cancel here and continue on with the wizard. Phone book file, we don't have one. In case you're running with this whole phone book file business is about, if we supported dial-up networking, we'd have to physically phone a telephone number. This was where we'd put our list of telephone numbers. Go Next. Go Next. Now we have to add in a phone book name, so let's go MyVPN. And we have to enter a name for a connection point services server. We'll put in 192.168.2.1. Next. Dial-up networking entities. We're not going to bother with that. Next. Do not change the routing table. Next. Do not configure proxy settings. Next. Add custom actions. If we had any, we'd put them in here. We don't. Next. There are two graphics that Windows 7 and 8 will have for connecting to a VPN. We can add our own custom ones here. We don't have any, so we're just going to go Next and Next. And the default icon for the VPN connection, we can put in our corporate logo or whatever if we wanted to. We don't have one. Next. If we had a customized help file, which is a .chm file on how to troubleshoot your connection or who to contact in the event of an error, we could put in this custom help file in here. We don't have one. Next. Support information. If we didn't have a customized help file, we can have call the help desk at 1-800 blah blah blah. We don't have that, so we're just going to click Next. If we had a specialized license agreement file, like the end user agrees not to steal our corporate secrets and must have an antivirus, etc., we'd have that in a text file. We'd put it in here. We don't have one. We'll go Next. If there are any additional files that we had to have, like an antivirus or whatever, we could put them in here. We don't have any. We'll go Next. We don't have any advanced customization that we have to do, so we're just going to click Next. And here's where we are storing our executable file, which is the answer to question number 5. Click Finish, and done. So let's just go there. See, program files, CMAC, profiles, Windows Vista and above, my VPN. And we have to copy this folder and toss this in our WDCO1 software folder or share. And there we go. Now that we have an installer, let's hop over to our client, Win8B, and we'll go to the RWDCO1 share. We'll copy the installer. Put that there, close this, and we'll run the install. Here's the exe. Yes. For my use only, we'll add a shortcut to the desktop, click OK. And for our username, we're going to put an administrator. Our good old password. And Contoso is our domain. Now, you'll note, once the installer is installed, that's it for the end of the lab. What we're doing right now is above and beyond. Why didn't they want us to test this out? I will show you. We'll click Connect. And you're going to wind up seeing that, yeah, this doesn't work. And the reason that this doesn't work is the previous exercise, when we completely uninstalled, well, disabled the VPN server on server 02. Way to go, Wiley. So we're going to cancel this. Put our NIC back onto the 2.1 network. Leave everything else the same. Close. Disable. Re-enable. Let that do its stuff in the background. And we'll go back to our server. Tools. Routing remote access. Let's reconfigure this. Once again, go through the wizard. VPN NAT. Next. We'll bind to our external network card. Next. Do you want IP addresses to automatically assign to your clients? We're going to go from a specified address range. Next. New. 192.168.1.30 to 192.168.1.35. Click OK. Next. Okay. Next. Sure. And let's start our service. I'll hop back to our client. Let's see if this works now. Well, would you look at that? Who would have thought you'd need to have routing or remote access and able to connect to it? And there you go. My VPN connected. just going to do a couple little quick tests here. Actually, we'll try this. Percent log on server percent and see if we actually authenticated on our WDCO1. Ta-da! That we have. Now I just want to show you what's going on here networking wise. Okay, so our point-to-point presence adapter, my VPN, has given us an IP address of 192.168.1.31, which we configured. And our physical adapter is 192.168.2.10. So here's our physical connection, and that's our tunnel. And with that, we'll sign off the VPN and on to the next lab.